Hey, what's up, guys? It's Will Bowman with The Art of the Interview. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode one. Episode one of the series. This is exciting. I'm excited to have you here today, and I'm excited to be talking to you about a subject that I personally absolutely love to talk about, and also to practice, which is the subject of interviews. So if this is the first episode of this series that you're watching, or maybe you're just coming back after listening to or watching other episodes of this series, um, I'm Will Bowman. My name is Will. I am a media producer and longtime interviewer. I have had many, many wonderful years of interviewing experience, including working at several small television stations, one which was for broadcast, and then one which was digital. And then as well as doing it for several media production companies that I have worked for. At every place that I've worked doing video production and media, audio production, I've always gotten the opportunity on many occasions to do interviews with people, and it is by far my favorite thing that I get to do. I probably have done over 100 interviews in my life. I know that's not saying much compared to some people. There are some incredible interviewers out there who have done thousands of interviews, and I honestly envy them. I hope in 20 to 30 years to be able to look back on my life and say, I too have done 1,000, 5,000, maybe even 10,000 interviews, and listened to those stories and gotten to take them and to turn them into something which is wonderful and beautiful and evocative for the people who are listening. So that being said, I have a little bit of experience interviewing. And in addition to that, I have a fascination with talking about interviewing, which is what brings me to this series that we're going to be doing, The Art of the Interview, where I am going to talk about how to ask better questions and just generally how to get better answers. So that is a perfect transition into really the first topic of today's episode, which is, what is an interview? So we hear this phrase tossed around quite a bit, right? Interview this, interview that. We talk about it in the context of news. Someone got interviewed on the news, right? Or talk shows. Someone went on Jimmy Kimmel, did an interview. Or we have job interviews too. Someone had a great job interview, or on the flip side, a terrible job interview. We talk about the concept of interviews quite a bit, but really, interviewing can be boiled down to a very, very specific and concise definition that I'm going to put forward in this episode. And that definition is, I'm going to start actually a little bit more broad, and then I'm going to narrow it down. But the first definition I'm going to posit to you is asking questions with a purpose for an audience. So again, the definition of an interview: asking questions with a purpose for an audience. Now, this definition captures most of the common types of interviews that we see out there, right? Like I said, talk shows, news shows, radio shows, even interviewing for a video production or a news story, like a written news story. Even if you're not recording their voice to be used, ultimately the information that you're getting from them is purposed for an audience, someone that's going to be consuming it later. So that's a slightly more broad definition, but I'm actually going to narrow it down even further to asking questions with a purpose. I think this is the true definition of an interview. I think that the audience is very commonly associated with interviewing, but I don't think it's necessary for something to be a true interview. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, there are times where we are asking questions with a purpose where we don't necessarily have an audience in mind for the information that we're gathering. For example, doing a job interview. It's highly likely that they're not going to take your information and deliver it to anybody else. They're going to make the decision based off of the the content that you've given to them, unless possibly that they're going to be sending it to someone else to make that decision, which could count as an audience, I suppose, but I still don't think it's quite the same. Another example is just having coffee with someone, a friend, a business coworker, an employee, a child. This is a context which you may be asking questions with a purpose, and you have no audience intended but yourself. And this is a very important fact to remember about interviewing, and why this series, in my opinion, is very important, because when you become a better interviewer, you become better in a lot of different areas of your life. You become a better conversationalist. You very well could become a better parent, father, mother. You could become a better friend, learning to ask people about what they want, what they think, what they're excited about. You might become a better spouse, being able to sit down at the end of the day and say, tell me about what you care about. Tell me about your life. Tell me about your day, right? This stuff really makes a big difference. I know I'm married. I know how important it is to be able to sit down with someone, my wife, and ask her questions with a purpose. It makes her feel very listened to and seen and special. And whoever you are out there, I know that there are areas in your life where being able to ask questions could benefit you and make you significantly better at what you do. Maybe you're a CEO, and asking the right questions can help you to identify business problems so you can solve them. Maybe you're a marketer, and asking your customers the right questions to really dive in to who they are and what they do could make a huge difference for you in being able to communicate with them and share your products and your offers with them. So those are just some examples, right? So that's the first question for today. What is the definition of an interview? And I'm going to say an interview is asking questions with a purpose. And this podcast is going to focus on this podcast is going to focus on the art of asking questions with a purpose. So that is our first topic for today. Second topic of today, I want to talk about the significance of doing an interview or asking for an interview. Now, for many of us who are probably listening to this podcast, interviewing is part of what we do. We're a media producer or a podcaster or a news reporter, and we're really just wanting to get better at what it is that we do for a living. And that's great. That's awesome. And we do this all the time. We already do interviews, right? But I think one of the things that we don't quite fully understand, or we don't consciously understand, maybe subconsciously we understand it, is what it is that we're really asking people to do when we ask them to do an interview with us. Because here's the thing, asking for an interview is not a small ask for someone. I know almost every one of you has been in a situation where you have been in front of a camera or in front of an audio recorder. And here's the thing, we are driven by our subconscious, right? And while that person who's standing in front of you or sitting in front of you does want to share with you, the moment that that camera gets turned on or that audio recorder gets turned on, subconsciously, they're going to feel threatened. They're going to feel nervous. They're going to feel scared, right? And when we get nervous, scared, or frightened, our subconscious has three options: fight, flight, or freeze. Now, I don't think that any of your interviewees are ever going to punch you in the face when you start asking them questions, purely on the matter of fact that they've already agreed to be there with you, unless you are a very hostile interviewer and have decided to pull out the big guns. On the other hand, I can't count the amount of times where we've turned on the camera and that subconscious freeze instinct has come on. Never had anybody run off of a set, but I'm sure some of them have considered it. interview is a scary situation for the people who we're interviewing. And if we're going to fully be able to be incredible interviewers, we need to understand that when we ask someone to do an interview with us, we're not making a small ask for them. And as such, we need to come prepared as interviewers to be able to be the best interviewers that we can, to be able to create a container of safety and to be able to put them at ease as much as possible and to be able to listen to them intentionally and deeply and to try our best to evoke the truth about them, not necessarily just the surface level things they might start telling us. Because I have, maybe unlike some other people, a foundational belief that all people at their core are good and they have something valuable to share, even the ones who we don't necessarily see as good. Maybe they're a little bit off or they've got some neuroses going on, right? As do we all. But deep down, everybody wants the same things. We're going to talk more about those in a future interview or a future podcast episode. And one of the foundationally important things about being good interviewers is understanding the gravity of what we're asking when people sit down, agree to sit down and share their thoughts, their emotions, their dreams, their frustrations, and just in general, anything that we're asking them to share with us. And when we truly realize that, that is going to make us a more intentional, a more compassionate, and a more deliberate interviewer who's dedicated to getting to the truth and getting there in a way that's generative to the person who we're talking to. Those are the two subjects of today's podcast. I'm excited to go on this journey with you. I'm excited to invite you into one of my favorite subjects, which is the art of the interview. And I'm excited for you to be able to use these skills to be a better interviewer, to get better answers, to ask questions with a purpose, maybe not for an audience. Maybe you're someone who does this for a living, or maybe you're just someone who has a family, a husband, a wife. Whatever the case is, I hope that you'll enjoy this podcast and that you'll get something out of it that you can use to be a better interviewer in whatever context that's important to you. All right, we'll see you next time on The Art of the Interview. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.